I know that you said you've lived in a Muslim country. I'll let you say what country that is because I kind of forget off the top. I know you've lived in England. I know you're now living in America. Can you tell me what the pros and cons of all of them and what you think Muslim countries got right versus, I don't know if you could call this a Christian country, but what was once a Christian country? Like, what did we both get right in your opinion, or what do you see?
Man, that's a great question. So I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I lived in Saudi Arabia for 20 years. My parents used to work out there. So there are a few things that annoy Americans, especially, but even Brits more than me saying anything positive about Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, because again, people like to have very binary thoughts and opinions on these things, and people actually like to be honestly, quite bigoted and ignorant when it comes to the situation. So, in terms of pros and cons, like this could be a whole podcast in itself. But I think that there are certain things for sure that any culture and society and any nation can learn from other ones. Um, One thing for sure is family. The value of family and communitarian spirit. People looking after each other. I think this is something that it still matters in the West. Of course, I don't want to make it sound like the West has completely lost its moral groundings or something like that. But family values have been really hammered over the past few decades. The value of marriage, the value of people staying together, raising children together, teaching children certain moral values, having this sense of family, sense of community, looking after each other. Because also, by the way, when this breaks down, again, stuff tends to go up towards the governmental level, and people are now expecting the government to be their daddy and to be their mommy and to look after them through their entire life and to solve every problem. Whereas in the past, we'd have structures and communities which didn't require the government for everything. So I think that's something that a lot of developing countries in general, and certainly I'd say Middle Eastern countries, do better than a lot of modern, more secular Western countries do now. Also, in terms of I guess protecting children in certain ways from different ideas. I think there's a big problem going on, especially in the U.S., where in a lot of these schools, kids are being taught stuff that is really not. It's really not age appropriate. I think it's outright immoral. I mean, there's no drag queen story hours going on in Saudi Arabia for sure. Um, but then, in terms of, we were talking before about equality under the law, people keep treating people equally, fairly, like giving people a certain level of freedom. Of course, these are things that the Western world does better than other parts of the world. Certainly Islamic countries, right? Things like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, all of these things. As much as we've lamented that they've been infringed upon in the West, those values still are there, and we have the right and the ability to have conversations like this and to access information across the internet and so on and so forth. So that's like a really and then of course just the treatment of individuals, right? Regardless of your race, religion, sexuality, gender, so on and so forth. Same rules apply to everybody, same laws apply to everybody. Treating people fairly, no discrimination. I think these are things that the West certainly does better than other parts of the world. So I think, there's a healthy balance to be had between what we call conservatism and liberalism. And there are nations and places that go too far, too extreme in one, and there's nations and places that go too far and extreme in the other one. And I think human beings in general struggle with this balance between, as we said, individualism and collectivism, liberty versus control and safety. Um, and it's a tricky one, because it matters the moral structure. The moral structures matter as well, because if you're going to have liberty and you're going to have a lot of rights, rights also come with responsibilities, and this is something we don't speak a lot about. I think we focus so much on rights. I focus on rights a lot, but with every right also comes a responsibility. And just because something is legal doesn't mean that it's good. There's a flip side to that as well. Just because something's illegal doesn't necessarily always mean that it's bad. But people need to have self-control. People need to have principles. People need to have values. People need to have things that they strive for. And I think if you have a society where there are a lot of people, and the majority of people believe that, then actually you can have a lot of liberty, and you trust that individuals are generally going to behave in good ways without needing huge force from the state, from governments, from police, and so on and so forth. Whereas if you don't believe that, then that can lead to much more authoritarianism, and the belief that people need to you need to put all these laws and ideas in place. I mean, I think what was it, the Constitution or the Bill of Rights? I mean, wasn't it the Constitution in the U.S. itself set out specifically for a religious and moral people and deemed to be insufficient for any other? I mean, that's an important part that's not often spoken about. So
Right.
it's like, yes, there's
Work
these
with
liberties and these
the
rights are protected, but in the absence of these other structures and guides, this is not sufficient. That this is not enough. So I think these things need to be balanced out. Do I think you need to go full theocracy? No. Do I think we need to go full anarchy? No. I think there's a healthful balance to be had, but I think it's important for people to also just be humble and to recognize that most things and places and systems and societies, it's rare to find something that's like all good or all bad, right? Even if you think that the way a certain country or government or society or culture behaves in certain aspects, even if you strongly disagree or even think certain things are immoral. By the way, there's no society, I can't think of any society where there's certain things that are considered acceptable or things that are like allowed. There's no society I can think of where I don't think there's some stuff that I have huge moral issues with.
right.
I can't think of any country which does not have certain ideas or things that a lot of people believe or do or whatever that I do not personally find highly, highly immoral.
Right.
I can't think of one, right,
And
at
even in
all.
like Sharia law countries, not everybody's following it, right? I've heard the stories of like, the rich kids and stuff. They be wilding to the side, like they because it's like certain people are suppressed. Some people are very godly, but other people stray and they
Mhm.
start just doing stuff under the table, so to speak. I
Of
guess
course.
this is my I want to follow up because I don't know the answer to this, but say with Sharia law country that goes hard versus like a Western country, is there a way to have a balance and get the best of both worlds, or do you think the hardcore Christian pastors are right when they say it's a slippery slope? They say, you let gay people get married, then it's going to lead to this. And it did. I don't know if that's why it led to this, but I would say 10 years ago, I'm like, you guys are too hardcore. Now I'm like,
Mm.
I mean, it did lead to everything you said it was going to lead. So is there a way to balance both? Or is it like the only way to cut out the degeneracy is to go full Sharia law or like Christian nation? Is that the only way to really end drag queen story hour, or is there a healthy balance that the West will find in the future?
Man, I would like to think that there's a healthy balance. And I want to say that, I think the West peaked, at least temporarily peaked. I want to say in like the late 90s to early thousands. I think that's
True.
when there was like, things were not perfect, far from perfect. You're never going to achieve perfection. But I think the pendulum was around the middle. And I think we're living in an era of overcorrection and things have swung too far another way. Also, I think that we're maybe reaching the peak of that. I think we might be reaching peak clown world, and things are going to start swinging back more towards normalcy without necessarily needing to go too far to another extreme, which brings a whole host of problems. So I think people struggle with balance. There's 8 billion people in the world. We are all different. We have different ideas, philosophies, moral principles to some degree. We have different religions. We have different political systems. And it's messy, man. It's always going to be messy. Just in the USA, there's 330 million people, all types of diversity, people from different countries, different backgrounds, different experiences, different social classes, races, ethnicities, religions, genders, sexualities, personality types, right? Everyone is an individual. So the best you can do is try to create something that broadly works for everybody. Are some people going to be dissatisfied? Yes. Are some people going to want more of this? Yes. Are some people going to want less of this thing? Yes. But it's messy. Liberty is messy. Freedom is messy. This is one of the first things that I will admit, right? I'm a big advocate for liberty. And people are, yeah, but there's this and there's that and there's this exception and there's that. And it's like, bro, I understand. Like, I get it. Liberty is messy. Liberty can feel a little bit dangerous sometimes, right? It does allow people who are extremist to maybe take advantage or game the system. However, I think it's better than the move towards authoritarianism. It's better than the move towards tyranny and top-down control, where it's like, okay, well, and who do you trust to do that? Nobody is an angel. We've discussed this many times, right? Who do you trust to be able to, just in the USA, is there any person in this world who you trust to just like have unbridled power over 330 million people? No, right?
Out of the God,
So as good as people's intentions
should I
can
trust
be,
early on?
yeah, as good as people's intentions can be, then it just doesn't work. It's tricky, man. So I think the answer is that there is a balance, but even the balance is far from perfect.
Be independent, I like my amendments. I don't want to bend it, I don't want to sentence. I am on a vengeance, I will not regret it. I am not defenseless, all my friends protected. Yeah. We let the enemy get too friendly. Now we quarantine like Julian inside the embassy. Pray, pray, pray.